Welcome back. You are listening to Nate the Hate on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell in your upper right-hand corner to get notified each time we have a brand new episode go live on YouTube. And I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer.
Hey, what's up, Nate? Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure having you. And our last episode, we talked about the first year of the PlayStation 5. And this week, we're going to talk about the Xbox Series X and S's first year on market and whether or not it is worth owning an Xbox Series X or S in the calendar year of 2021. But before we get into today's topic, I have to remind everyone to brace yourselves, for winter is coming. But what the writers of Game of Thrones didn't want to tell you is that Bran was actually in a wheelchair because he didn't trim his balls with Manscaped. Poor guy thought it was okay to trim his balls with a traditional razor and hair trimmer. Not sure what you want as a gift for the holidays? Well, Manscaped is the ultimate gift, and they're here to change the men's grooming game. And you can get 20% off and free shipping if you use code NateTheHate. That's one word, NateTheHate, at manscaped.com. Now, MVG, I know you don't want to find yourself in that type of situation.
Definitely not, Nate. And I got to say, it's time to gear up and get yourself the gift of shaving this holiday season. And I'm talking about the Manscaped Perfect Package 4.0. The performance package is the best in the business. The hygiene bundle includes the Lawnmower 4.0, the Weed Whacker, the boxes, the travel kit, the liquid formulations. It's all there. The Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer is waterproof with advanced skin-safe technology, and I use mine in the shower all the time. You get that really great close shave, and you don't have any cuts and nicks on your nether regions down there, so everything is good to go. The Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer is something that I'm a big fan of, and I use all the time. And again, it's just got that protection, so you don't cut yourself. And of course, the crop preserver, the deodorant for your balls to protect against chafing, and the crop reviver ball toner will keep your boys fresh at all times. And of course, the refined cologne by Manscaped. I'm not sure if we've mentioned the cologne before, but it's excellent. It's got a clean and fresh scent designed for the refined gentleman. And to top it all off, you get the shed travel bag to carry all that stuff in, and some anti-chafing boxer briefs to hold down the entire package. But Nate, why don't you let the fine listeners know more about what Manscaped is offering today?
Yes, Manscaped is offering you a way to avoid having your own red wedding where you spill just a lot of blood by using the improper tools. And you can get 20% off and free shipping with the code NateTheHate. That is, once again, one word, NateTheHate, at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use NateTheHate. It's time to join the Manscaped movement. These products are no joke. And with that, we can move into the first topic of today's episode, which is the Xbox Series X and S's first year. But we will be talking about the Xbox 20th anniversary, which was celebrated earlier this week, where we found out the future of backwards compatibility, some of the new additions made to the service, and Phil Spencer made some interesting comments about software emulation that we will talk in the later half. But first, let's talk about the Xbox Series X first year, which was a bit of a mixed bag of emotions because, much like the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series S and X didn't exactly launch out of the gate with a big, new, enticing exclusive. It was meant to have Halo Infinite there day one, but as we know, 343 and Microsoft had to make the difficult decision to delay the game a full year, and it finally did come to market with the beta release of Halo Infinite's multiplayer, which is available now free to play on the Xbox line of platforms as well as PC. But aside from really Gears of War Tactics, there wasn't a major launch game. We had Tetris Effect connected, Gears of War Tactics, as mentioned, a variety of third-party software. But I would argue that the true launch game that had any meaning for the Xbox Series line of platforms was the Game Pass service.
Yes, I would totally agree with that, Nate. I think what saved the Xbox's launch, honestly, was Game Pass, and backward compatibility. I think those two things were enough for most people to be fairly satisfied with what Xbox launched with. And I think another game that we may have forgotten about is Yakuza Like a Dragon as well. Is that technically an exclusive though, or do you consider an exclusive game?
I mean, I guess it technically was a console exclusive for, I believe, the first 6 months.
Right. But I mean, even that aside, it was a pretty shaky launch for Xbox. They had Dirt 5 and they had a couple of other games that were on the PlayStation as well. But I made a video about the 20th anniversary of the Xbox. I know we're going to talk about that here later, but I came out of Xbox One feeling pretty unsure about the future of the Xbox. And I think when the Xbox Series S and X launched, I kind of came into that generation feeling a little skeptical about, Phil Spencer and the team kind of was talking a big game about how, Game Pass is going to revolutionize gaming and they are going to get back to, I don't want to say the good old days, but, get Xbox back as a brand and a system that everyone should be playing. And I kind of came into it thinking, is this just more of the same, albeit with more powerful hardware? And when the systems did launch, you kind of got the feeling that it was more of the same. They didn't have anything. And you're right. Unfortunately, Halo, the delay of Halo kind of hurt them quite a lot, I think. I mean, yes, it was the right move. And again, we'll go into that later on. But I think, Xbox came in with not really much. But ultimately, Game Pass is what really helped Xbox last holiday season. And I think, as far as the year this year, it's just kind of gotten better, but it's been very, very gradual. It started out very shaky, but they have found their footing. And I'm pretty pleased with the end result of that. But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts about the launch of the Xbox? Because I was very kind of, I don't know, something felt like it was just going to be more of the same. And they had dug themselves into such a hole with the Xbox One that it was going to be very difficult to get out of. But that they have actually done a lot of groundwork this year overall.
They definitely have done a lot of groundwork. And to your point of it feeling as though it was just going to be more of the same, PlayStation 5 and the Xbox are both guilty of that.
True.
When I look at the launches, PlayStation 5 and Xbox just felt like pro versions of their pro version.
Yes.
You had the SSD, you did have more processing power, and you were getting better visuals. You were getting native 4K, which, I mean, we had 4K on the PlayStation 4 Pro and even the Xbox One X, but now this was refined. This was better. It was almost like it was fulfilling the promise that those platforms couldn't deliver upon. And it was kind of like, well, is this just a continuation of the generation that we were previously in, especially in those opening couple of months? But as 2021 really began to take its, a hold of its own, we began to see some of the software that was really able to differentiate itself from the previous generation. And when you look at the original Xbox One, or the VCR, as we often dub it, you really become aware of its limitations.
Yep.
It struggles with a lot of the releases that came to the Xbox platform this year from both Microsoft and third-party partners. And, one of the titles that had to omit the Xbox One completely was Microsoft's Flight Simulator. That was one of the first Microsoft published games that was exclusive to the Xbox Series line of platforms, not including PC.
Yep.
And that was kind of that first realization of what next generation gaming can be like on this family of hardware. And since then, we've gotten some other games that we will get into in a little later. But the launch of the Xbox Series X was definitely shaky, as you mentioned. It did feel as though just a more refined version of an Xbox One X. And Game Pass was the highlight because with Game Pass, you've got, Tetris, Gears Tactics, you got a vast back catalog of software, but now you were able to play them at higher resolution or a better frame rate. And aside from Game Pass, another standout for Microsoft, especially in 2021, would it be how they have approached backwards compatibility and, playing games like Dead Space. We know that there is a remake coming sometime next year, but playing Dead Space, the original game, on an Xbox Series X at 4K with auto HDR, it feels as though it is basically a modern re-release. The game holds up incredibly well. And for someone who had not played Dead Space since it came out on the PlayStation 3, to replay the game on a Series X, it felt like a completely new and fresh experience. It truly felt as though this game had come out maybe in 2020 or even 2021 itself. And that's a fantastic, underrated feature that the Xbox and Microsoft have really not gotten proper credit for.
Yeah.
Is the backwards compatibility solution is one of the system's strongest must-see features. And to go along with that, the resume play.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to
quick resume.
Yeah,
oh,
quick resume.
Amazing. Yeah.
It is an amazing feature, and I find myself using it more and more, partially due to some of the more recent releases, and they just kind of complement the feature in a really nice way. But yeah, those first 6 months, it felt as though Microsoft really had to get their footing. The lack of Halo definitely threw Microsoft off course. They didn't really have a recovery planned in case that had to happen.
Right.
And it was clearly a huge omission for them. And they knew if we bide enough time, we will get our footing and we will be able to march forward and build up some momentum going into holiday 2021. And I recall last year having this type of conversation where at the time, it looked as though Sony was really going to run away with 2021 because of the software lineup that they were marketing, which had God of War, Horizon, Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7. And at that time, we still did not know officially that Forza Horizon 5 was going to come out on the Xbox this year. Halo was still in limbo. We really didn't know what Microsoft had in store for even Game Pass in terms of exclusive deals with third party and day one releases. Like earlier this year, we had the surprise get of Outriders and MLB The Show.
Yeah, I mean, look, Game Pass and backward compatibility, like I said, was enough for Xbox to stay above water last holiday and sell a lot of systems. And basically, I think a lot of the marketing was, we've got a lot of things to show, right? We're working on a lot of really cool things. And if you recall, we saw like a trailer for Perfect Dark at the end of last year, and we saw, some new kind of trailers come out through this year. So Microsoft is really kind of planting the seeds that, look, this is the system that you want to be on, and they knew that they had a gap there, but I think they covered it pretty well. And look, backward compatibility, like you said, is a great feature. It's not just playing old games. The FPS boost that you get, I think, is probably the biggest thing that I really like to see, because in some cases, the original games that played on the 360 or on the Xbox One didn't come anywhere close to running at 60. Sometimes they were capped at 30. And now, in some situations, it's a transformative experience, like a game like Prey by Bethesda, which didn't really run very well at all on last gen hardware. It just, it ran like 25 frames per second. It was just a choppy mess of a game, and it had significantly long loading times. Games like that, you play now, and they are, it's like playing a completely brand new game. So, Microsoft are offering those experiences, those games, a chance to go back and revisit some of these games, I think, is a smart one. And look, they've, like I said, they did enough, and they've kind of kept that carrot dangling in front of you while they're slowly starting to bring out some of the games that they probably wanted to bring out earlier. And now we're starting to see the fruits of those labors, starting to appear and onto, 2022 with what's next and everything.
Yeah, it definitely feels as though Microsoft has gained their footing, and they continue to show us a roadmap that is very fleshed out of what they want to bring to the platform in the future. As you mentioned, Perfect Dark from the Initiative, we also know that they have the intent of making a brand new Fable game.
Yep.
And these are games from their back catalog that we haven't seen new entries to for many years. We haven't seen a Perfect Dark game since Perfect Dark Zero launched the Xbox 360. And Perfect Dark Zero it's not a great game.
Right.
I'm not sure if anyone really loves it.
It's not a good game at all. I mean, it looks good. It was technically a very nice looking game at the time, but as far as gameplay, it's not great.
Yeah, it definitely didn't live up to the original. But when you look at the Initiative, they've now taken on Crystal Dynamics to assist them with the development of the game, which appears to be the plan from the beginning, because the head of the Initiative has worked, I believe they even founded Crystal Dynamics many years ago.
Yep.
And Crystal Dynamics, we know, is a very talented studio. Yes, the Avengers was a complete misfire, but that's not purely on Crystal Dynamics. That's also Square Enix, who was the publisher, who guided them in a direction for what the game had to be with, microtransactions and live service and all that. But we've seen what they've done with the Tomb Raider trilogy. Very, a very good structure and core there. And Fable's in the hands of a very talented studio at Turn 10. And is it Turn 10 or is it Playground?
Playground.
Okay. Yeah, Turn 10 does Forza Motorsports mainline. And it's exciting to see these return to these franchises that really helped define what the Xbox was at a time, because Fable was that huge game for the original Xbox. You had Peter Molyneux out there all the time over-promising and overselling what the original Fable was going to be. I recall reading old interviews where he claimed you could plant an acorn and you come back 10 years later in the game when you'd have wrinkles on your face and a tree would grow. There was no such mechanic in the game like that to be found. He also said the combat was similar to Soul Calibur. That wasn't true either. But it made you hyped for the game.
Yes.
And we see that they are beginning to understand what they have to do to make the Xbox that platform for gamers once again. And that's why they made huge waves earlier this year when they acquired ZeniMax and Bethesda for the area of $7 billion. Now, with that acquisition, Microsoft now holds the rights to iconic IPs, which include Doom, The Elder Scrolls, Wolfenstein, Starfield, and a whole bunch of others like Quake. They have access to dozens of studios whose talent is immeasurable, and you have iconic names like Shinji Mikami.
Yep. Todd Howard.
Yes. I mean, it's game changing, but we haven't seen fruits from this tree yet, because the seed was just planted, or we can even say the tree was planted because they bought an already established tree and they rerouted it.
Yeah.
They've put down new soil and they've given it new nutrients. And it's going to take a little while before we really see the impacts of this acquisition. But I would imagine the first major one is going to be the end of 2022, when Bethesda's ambitious project Starfield releases exclusively on the Xbox series of platforms.
Yeah, and I think that will be the time where people will say Microsoft made the right choice, with the acquisition. Because right now, you're right, Nate, it's still very early, and look, if you kind of reviewed this year, Bethesda didn't really deliver much from Microsoft this year. I think they're still basically trying to clear their slate of existing contracts, with Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, and even Quake. I mean, I can talk about that. That was obviously something that was done, signed before the merger had gone through. So I mean, stuff like that. I think we already knew that they were working on those IPs. So yeah, it's going to be a little while before we see Bethesda start to bear fruit for Microsoft. But yeah, I think Starfield will be. I mean, it's going to be a pretty big game next year. One of the biggest releases of the year, undoubtedly. And I think at that point, people are going to start taking notice about the acquisition and say, yes, I think Microsoft made the right choice at that point.
Yeah, because right now we really don't have anything to judge the acquisition off. As you mentioned, Quake was a multi-platform game due to contracts, and it is fairly ironic that Microsoft, up to this point, via Bethesda, has published more exclusive games on Sony than they have the Xbox.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. But it also, I think it's also a credit to, and look, not just Microsoft, for disturbing the landscape, but I think Sony and Bethesda, because I mean, I think that all of them work together, to ensure that gamers ended up getting the games that they were told they were going to get. So I think hats off to all the companies that were involved there, rather than just, the acquisition happened and then, everything just stopped, right? So I think, honoring existing contracts was a good thing for everyone.
Now, one thing that we did talk about last year when the proposition of Microsoft absorbing Bethesda was made was the idea that we would still see some titles potentially going multi-platform. But over the course of 2021, Phil Spencer has made it quite clear that this may not be the case. And Starfield, I feel as though, was that first declaration that major releases of that tier, be it the next Elder Scrolls game, are going to be exclusive to the Xbox brand of systems. And it's certainly something that surprised me. Did it surprise you?
Yes and no. I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is all about getting more people on Game Pass. So for me, look, it's hard to really say, because I mean, Starfield was a game that was probably in development. Well, it's been in development for quite a long time. And initially it would have started its development before, Microsoft was even talking to Bethesda, right? So, I mean, I think it's safe to assume that at some point, maybe earlier on, it was, potentially a multi-platform game. But I think Phil Spencer is a smart guy, and I think anything that makes sense to bring to Game Pass to really maximize the amount of people that use that service, he's going to do. And I think, another game that I initially thought maybe would be multi-plat was the new Indiana Jones game that Machine Games is working on. But the more I think about that, Nate, I think that's also going to end up probably as an exclusive on Xbox as well. So, look, I think at the end of the day, if it makes sense to bring these games to Game Pass exclusively and on your Xbox where, obviously Game Pass exists, then I think that's what Phil's going to do, most of the time. There may be the occasional outlier where, the game may become multi-plat, but I think for the most part, I would expect to see these games on Game Pass.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting the transition to take a little longer. I thought maybe Starfield still would have been that game that goes multi-platform due to any pre-existing contracts, because I do remember right before the acquisition was actually announced that there were rumors that Sony was trying to secure Starfield as a PlayStation exclusive, and we saw them do that with Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo. So it really wasn't that far out of the realm of reality that Sony would have loved to secure a third title. And for that title to really be Microsoft exclusive is, I don't want to say surprising, but I think it may be a smart move for Microsoft at the end of the day. Now, like Indiana Jones you bring up, that's a curious project because I do wonder if there's any stipulation that could be made from Disney to require it go multi-platform.
It's possible, and that's definitely an unknown variable in this conversation. That you're right. They may want it to be multi-platform, and when you have another party that's involved in a very powerful, influential party like Disney, then yeah, it may change to a multi-platform game. But I think Phil and Microsoft are still probably trying to push for exclusivity. But yeah, you're right. Disney may have their own thoughts and ideas about that as well. We'll have to see how that one plays out, though.
Yes, and shockingly, Microsoft really didn't make any other acquisitions this year, despite there being.
I thought it was acquisition season, Nate.
I did see hashtags on Twitter. Apparently the hashtags were actually referencing the industry and not Microsoft exclusively.
I mean, there were a lot of industry acquisitions, but
yeah,
we didn't see anything else from Microsoft this year.
We didn't, and they felt as though there were monthly rumors from various sources. I recall one as recently as I believe it was August saying Microsoft was on the verge of closing a big deal within a month, which clearly did not happen. But there were rumors around E3, pretty much every event that took place this calendar year. And you'd have studio names even come out where they were close to acquiring Avalanche. Yeah. They were close to acquiring Crytek. And we just recently had it where people believe they are acquiring Sega due to a Microsoft Azure deal.
The thing about mergers and acquisitions is I've gone through them myself over the years that I've worked. And here's the reality of mergers and acquisitions. Most people don't even know they happen until the day comes, right? And the people that do know about it are usually high-level executives. So it's very hard for me to imagine that high-level executives are leaking this stuff to the press or to media outlets or to anyone before the actual event occurs. And I think when the Bethesda thing happened, it kind of just really took people by surprise because it's like, oh my God, what? This is crazy. So when I hear about like there's rumors about Avalanche or there's rumors about WB or there's rumors about Take-Two, I just take that stuff with a grain of salt because whoever the insider is that's leaking this information out clearly doesn't really have they don't really have a good understanding about what's going on. Because like I said, most of the time it's going to be management executives that are in the know with this stuff. And I got to say, if they get caught leaking this stuff out, I mean, this is damaging well beyond them getting fired. This is, prone to lawsuits and stuff like that. So, it could potentially affect stock prices. I mean, this is no joke, This kind of stuff, right? So I take this stuff with a grain of salt most of the time. The only one that I think people really kind of thought was going to happen was Bluepoint because Sony kind of messed up anyway. And, they already had that, welcome to the family Bluepoint like GIF before they did it. They kind of messed that one up. But otherwise, look, I don't really put too much stock into acquisition rumors, Nate.
Yeah, I mean, it felt as though every time an event was coming up, we had a new rumor and a company attached. And I'm sure Microsoft is having discussions with these studios. We know WB was looking for a buyer, and I'm sure Microsoft inquired.
Yep.
Now, were they ever close to a deal? Probably not. I'm sure it was more of a case of Microsoft said, what are you looking to sell? And what type of pricing range are you looking at? And they may have made an offer and made some terms. Because we know one of the complexities with the WB deal was that originally it sounded as though you weren't going to get any of the licensing to the IPs. And if you're going to buy WB's development teams, but you're not going to have access to Lego or Batman, what are you actually buying?
Right.
Nothing. You're buying some talented development studios, but you want Batman, you want the Arkham series, you want all those Lego licensing, you want Mortal Kombat. That's what you want to be buying. you don't want to just buy NetherRealm.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm sure ample discussions were made with numerous studios. And I feel as though one aspect with the Bethesda deal that people often overlook is that ZeniMax was looking for a buyer. They had been looking for a buyer for over a year. And Microsoft saw that opportunity. Now, whenever I see like Sega come up or Take-Two come up, they're not looking to be acquired. They are very big corporations. They are worth more than what ZeniMax was. And ZeniMax, again, was looking to be purchased. So they were shopping around with a price in mind. Take-Two just acquired, I believe. No, it was Take-Two was looking to acquire. What's the developer who did?
You're not going to say Grove Street Games, are you?
No, not Grove Street Games. They Take-Two bought the Dirt developer, right? Codemasters.
EA bought Codemasters.
No, yes,
but there was
Take-Two was close to a final deal, and EA came in at the 11th hour with a higher bid.
That is correct. Yep.
So if I'm Take-Two, if I'm looking to purchase studios like Codemasters, I'm not looking to sell. I'm looking to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So like those type of rumors do, as you mentioned, seem baseless. And Microsoft is not going to be purchasing a Japanese company the size of Sega Sammy.
Right. And they're massive, and they do a lot more than just make video games.
Correct. And what we've seen from Microsoft instead is they've leveraged a great relationship with Sega, and we've also seen them do it with Square Enix. They're making Game Pass deals with these companies by getting Yakuza Like a Dragon on Game Pass. No, it wasn't on Game Pass day one, but they had it exclusive.
Yes, to the Xbox.
On the Xbox.
Yep.
But it's now on Game Pass along with every other installment of the Yakuza series. With Square Enix, we have had Final Fantasy 7, 8, 10, and I believe 12 and 13 are all on Game Pass, plus Dragon Quest, Octopath Traveler. Octopath Traveler has not released on a Sony platform. It's only on Switch and Xbox if we're not counting PC. That's surprising. That means Microsoft may have put a little money to keep that exclusive to their brand, because we've seen Sony do something similar with Final Fantasy VII. They continue to money hat that to keep it exclusive to the PlayStation. And if I'm Microsoft, instead of buying these type of studios, continue to make wise and well-placed Game Pass deals, because that will lead subscribers not only to the service, but may also potentially move hardware. And if you look at Japanese sales, the Xbox Series is selling quite well for an Xbox system. It's nearing 100,000 units in just about a year of introduction in the region. And if you look at the Xbox One, which sold abysmally, I believe it took it 50 months to sell 100,000 units. Microsoft is seeing some growth. And a lot of that can be attributed to the Xbox Series S low pricing point of entry, and Game Pass allowing the consumer access to hundreds of games. And when you have titles like Dragon Quest 11 on the service, that makes it a very appealing device for the Japanese audience. And now with Game Pass also streaming to your phone via xCloud, it's really catering to the Japanese market in a way we have not seen previous Xboxes do.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest surprise was probably the Series S as well. Again, it was something that when announced, I was unsure about whether, the industry needed two SKUs, but they've kind of proven me wrong, because the Series S is actually a very capable system. Yes, it's not as powerful as the Series X, but I have both systems now, and I regularly do comparisons between the two. And I got to be honest, Nate, it's hard for me sometimes to really notice anything really major. The Series S is very, very powerful, and for $299, it represents easily the most powerful system that you're going to get at that price point. And I think about the Nintendo Switch as a comparison, and I know, look, people are going to say it's not a fair comparison. And yes, it isn't, because, we're comparing a hybrid handheld system to a console, but I'm just talking about price, versus performance, right? And for $299, you get a lot of performance on the Series S that just eclipses what the Switch offers. So ultimately, it's priced extremely well for what it does, and I can see why it's doing so well in Japan. It's a smaller system. It's kind of something that you can just stick on your shelf. You don't have to worry about it. And then with the added feature of Game Pass, and again, as mentioned, the backward compatibility, it really does make it a great system to buy and use. And I love mine. I mean, I use mine all the time. I think it's a fantastic system, and I can definitely see why it's been embraced by many of its customers.
Yeah, I believe an analyst group recently put out some data that suggests the Series S is selling in certain regions at a rate of 2-to-1 compared to the Series X. And now part of that is due to supply constraints of the Series X. But in some of the emerging markets, the Series S is the favorable choice because, as you mentioned, it is more affordable. And it seems as though this was a really well thought out marketing strategy from Microsoft to introduce this lower end affordable device to their family of Xbox systems. And I mean, I believe Phil Spencer had said it last year that he anticipates that the Series S could be the best-selling SKU in the long term.
Could easily be, yeah.
This is definitely something that they had thought about and explored and market researched prior to the introduction of both these systems, and it seems to be paying off very well for them. Now, one area that Microsoft definitely struggled in 2021 with is exclusive software. And Microsoft really only put out about a handful of exclusive games over the course of the last 12 months. And as mentioned earlier, the first one was Microsoft's Flight Simulator. Now, this is a game that definitely is not to the taste of the majority of gamers out there, but I know you love getting in your plane and flying all over the world as a relaxation event.
I do. It's a great game. I played it on the PC when it first dropped there, and I think the first thing I thought about was this would be fantastic on the Xbox, and surely enough, Microsoft gave it to us. Look, it's a niche game, let's be honest. I mean, a lot of people don't even consider it a game, and I can see that point of view as well, but it is a great experience, and it is a good showcase of the potential of what the next generation of Xbox can do. There is a lot I really like about the game, and I'm very happy that it's on there. In fact, I still play it, like not every day, but I still love to jump on it and just fly around. There's something very just tranquil about the whole thing, and I recommend it to anyone really.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there with the idea that Flight Simulator really did introduce the idea of what these platforms could deliver in terms of a next generation experience. When you partner in the cloud Azure aspect with the real time and dynamic weather, and just the lack of load time as you're flying across, countries, states, the ocean, whatever, wherever you deem fit to explore and just enjoy. It really showcased a gaming experience that you really could not find on the Xbox One. This could not be replicated on the Xbox One, not only from visual fidelity and performance-wise, but just the immersive atmosphere that the game conveyed.
Yeah.
And that trend kind of continued as we got into the later half of 2021. And I would say Forza Horizon 5, the most recent release from Microsoft, further exemplifies what the next generation experience can be on these platforms. And I know Forza Horizon 5 is playable on the Xbox One, but I can't imagine playing it on anything but my Series X.
Same. Well, I've heard good things, though, about the old VCR, but no, I mean, this game is meant to be played on Series S or Series X. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And look, I think Microsoft really delivered this game at the right time.
Yes.
It's a fantastic game. I absolutely love it. Look, it's probably my favorite game of the game of this year, Nate. I'm really having a lot of fun playing it. They've done so much to this game to really kind of make it more accessible to the average person. I like the Forza Horizon series, but I think my biggest worry about the game before I started playing it was I felt like maybe they wouldn't really change it up as far as the game itself. They would have some of those ridiculous races where you're racing against an airplane, or you're trying to beat cross country through wheat fields and stuff, just all that kind of weird and wacky stuff. But they've kept that stuff in, but they've made it a lot more fun now, and I really have appreciated what they've done to make the game, to open up the gameplay. And let's not forget the amazing, gorgeous landscape of this game. I've been playing the game for the last few weeks, and sometimes I just sit back and watch and think, man, this game just looks incredible. I just can't get over visually how amazing this game looks and how smooth it plays. And look, I said this on my Xbox 20 video, but I think it's the killer app for the Xbox Series X. If you buy a Series S or an X, then get that Game Pass and play Forza, because it is truly an amazing experience. And look, Microsoft hit it out of the park with this one. It's just phenomenal.
Yes, the setting of Mexico, the lush biomes that you explore, the variety that the biomes deliver. You have Baja races in the desert. You can drive up the side of a volcano and you can collect water samples as a side quest. Then you can go to the coast where you can get hit with a tropical storm, or you might get caught in a dust storm. The environment is so alive in Mexico, and it makes each race feel thrilling. But you also have those side quests, where it might be drive into the center of a dust storm to take a picture,
right,
or drive into the tropical storm. It feels as though there's a lot of variety here, and that's what makes the game such a joy to play. I feel as though I'm always discovering something new. And you even have the missions where they will take you to temples.
Yeah, I love those. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because some of them will be like race through it and you're driving by these beautiful landscapes at 150 miles an hour. But I'll return and I'll just drive around and really take in the scenery. And they even tell you the temple you're looking at. So if you choose to, you can, pick up your phone and maybe Google it, and you can learn about the culture and all these settings in this just beautiful region. And I just love how they really delivered and conveyed the culture in this game. And it is, as you said, I think this is the killer app for the Xbox Series line of platforms. This was the first true killer app for the series. And the game already has upwards of 9 million players in less than 2 weeks.
That's crazy. Absolute crazy statistic, but it deserves all the success. It's a wonderful game, and look, Microsoft is really coming good at the right time of the year. Between Forza and we haven't talked about Psychonauts yet, but those two releases really, came at the right time, where before that there wasn't really much. There was a couple of interesting things, Death's Door and The Ascent. Death's Door, is a game that people really like. I thought it was pretty good, but I wasn't really huge on Death's Door, Nate. I don't know if you ever played it, but The Ascent was a pretty decent game, and then we had The Medium as well. So those three games were all okay. They were pretty good, but nothing really knocked it out of the park for me there. But along comes Psychonauts 2, which is a Game of the Year contender, which I really liked. And then Forza, which, we will have our Game of the Year show at some point. But look, I think it deserved to be there for sure. And I think it's just a phenomenal game.
absolutely deserved to be a Game of the Year nominee. And I understand the cutoff point could make that difficult for the jury to nominate it because they may have only had a limited amount of time with the game and they weren't quite sure if they wanted to nominate for Game of the Year based on the amount of hours they had spent. But I would argue that Forza Horizon 5 or the month of November 2021 is the true launch of the Series X and Series S.
I would absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree with that, Nate.
And I mean, it took a year, but we finally do have that big exclusive. And to really put frosting on the delectable cake, Microsoft comes in for the 20th anniversary and they decide to announce that you can play Halo Infinite multiplayer in 1 month early. You can play it right now. It launched on Monday, November 15th, free to play. And when you pair that with Forza Horizon 5, Halo Infinite, this is the launch of the platform. This is what Microsoft wanted to deliver a year ago.
Yes.
They finally were able to do it. And this pairing really makes me appreciate Quick Resume because as I'm racing in Forza Horizon and maybe I get near the event that I really want to participate in, I say, hey, my friends are playing Halo Infinite.
Yeah.
Tap out, go into Halo, play a few matches, go back into Forza. Seamless, simple, fast.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's really showing me what this feature can be.
Look, I love Quick Resume. Like I was playing Forza and then I had to unplug the Series X because I wanted to use it for a video. So I unplugged it out of the living room, brought it into my office here, and I kind of let it sit in my office here for a few days. Then I plugged it in, did all the recording I needed to do for the video, and then I plugged it back into my living room setup, and I jumped into Forza, and it quick resumed, and it was right there waiting for me. It didn't like sign me out of my Xbox Live account and kick me back to the title screen or do any weird stuff like that. It was just there. It was literally on the road waiting for me to just start driving the car again. And I was just like, this is fantastic. I love this feature. Like, It was one of those features where I was like, this is a cool marketing gimmick. I don't know if I'm going to use it. Because, when the Series X and S released, the games that had quick resume weren't really that compelling anyway. Like, I know you could use it on a game like Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which, hey, I love Ori. It's a phenomenal game, but it's also a smaller game, and basically just continuing from a checkpoint isn't really a big deal anyway. But a game like Forza that, has to get back to where you were on the map, there's a little bit of loading that's involved, and there's some wait time to get, through the menus and stuff to get back onto the map and start racing again because you got to pick your car and get back on the road. In this scenario, man, it was fantastic, and I really do see the value of it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's plenty to critique with the system as we have, and it took a year for it to really feel as though it found its footing, and it has, and just in time for the holiday, which I'm sure was Microsoft's hope and plan, the entire duration of the calendar year of 2021. But they're definitely on a good heading now. Yeah, and it's going to be capped off with hopefully a quality campaign from Halo Infinite. This, launches on December 8th. We should be hearing more about the campaign in the near future, and hopefully it is promising. We've had some previews come out in, I believe just in the last couple of weeks, and it sounds good. There's definitely a little bit of hesitation as how that open world is going to feel, because still, based on my expectation, based on the previews and all the information that's out there, it feels as though the campaign may be more enjoyable in co-op, and we know we have at least a 6-month wait until we're going to have that co-op campaign made available to us. But I am hopeful that it is a quality single-player experience. We will obviously find that out in the next couple of weeks. But before I go into the next topic, what would you grade the Xbox Series X and S's first year overall?
So I gave PlayStation a B. And I'm going to give Xbox a B as well. And I'm not fence sitting, but I think it's about right, for me. Like, it's almost like the reverse of PlayStation, because PlayStation's kind of first half of this year was pretty good. You had Returnal, you had Ratchet, you had Miles Morales, you had Demon Souls. It wasn't a terrific PlayStation launch, but it was definitely stronger than Xbox. Xbox had Game Pass and backward compat, as mentioned, to kind of get you through the first quarter of this year, and then they started to drop games. The Medium, Death's Door, The Ascent started to show up, and it got some traction. And then Psychonauts 2 was really a big game for them. Flight Simulator, even though it was a niche game, let's be honest, was a very technically impressive game. People love it, and of course, the kind of crescendo of the 1-2 Forza Horizon 5, Halo multiplayer, and hopefully a good Halo campaign really made Microsoft come good at the end. So I think a B is about right. Yeah. What do you think for that? You had a B- for Sony last time, I thought.
Yeah, I gave Sony a B-. So I think with Microsoft, I have to come in at a C+.
Ooh, fair enough.
It's good.
Yep.
With room for improvement. And what's preventing me from giving it even a B- is that those first 10 months, everything that preceded Forza Horizon 5 was satisfactory. As we mentioned, Game Pass was definitely a big contributor in that, and I got to revisit old games that maybe I had played on my PlayStation 3, or even games I just have not played, and it gave me access to them. Game Pass definitely introduced me to a lot of third-party or even indie games I may not have checked out, like The Artful Escape.
Yes.
It's up there for, I believe it's Impact Game of the Year. It is quite a moving experience. This is a game that I definitely would not have bought because it would have flown under my radar, but it was on Game Pass. It introduced me to it. I thoroughly enjoyed playing it. And outside of Game Pass and the backwards compatibility, that wait for that next-gen exclusive for the Series X was just lengthy.
Mm-hmm.
Flight Simulator is, truly an engrossing experience, but as the name suggests, it's a simulation.
Right.
It is not a game in the traditional sense, which is fine. So I don't want to rate it in the B range because it ended so high, because that feels as though it could potentially be, because it's ending on a high note, that it is fogging my memory of what the prior months were.
That's a good point. I mean, yeah, you're right. We have that kind of, the bias, what do they call it?
Recency bias.
Recency bias. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that does come into it as well. So yeah, I can definitely get your point of view there.
Well, as mentioned, the Xbox is ending on a incredible high note. I mean, with Forza Horizon 5, the Halo Infinite multiplayer, that is a ton of fun. It is incredibly well polished. And maybe had the campaign come out in November, I would have altered my score differently. But I feel as though Microsoft is on a good trajectory now moving into 2022. And, we have the Game Awards coming up. I'm sure Microsoft will be there and they will showcase maybe some new game announcements, updates on titles like Hellblade, maybe Avowed, and give us an updated look at the roadmap for 2022 and beyond. But they definitely ended 2021 strong. I just wish we had a little more variety in terms of software and big releases scattered throughout the calendar year. But I mean, Game Pass was definitely that saving grace. Making deals to get MLB The Show Game Pass Day 1, getting Outriders and titles of that caliber on the service was no small feat. And they do deserve credit for making those type of deals happen. I just wish they had one or two major Game Pass exclusives over the course of the year, not from Microsoft published houses, from third parties that they were able to, money hat or secure for 6 months beyond something like the Medium, something bigger, something that was more exciting for the industry. That's why I come in at a C+. Still a strong year overall, definitely a rough start, but ending strong. And if you're picking up an Xbox this holiday, there's definitely a lot to love and a lot to look through on that Game Pass catalog. And of course, as we mentioned, you have Forza Horizon 5, Halo Infinite, you're definitely having a good time gaming this year if you pick up an Xbox on Black Friday or you get one for a holiday gift. Now, the topic that we're going to end with is it was part of the Xbox 20th anniversary where they gave a new list of the Xbox backwards compatibility. They included 70 plus new additions to the program. And among these were titles like Max Payne 1, 2, and Max Payne 3, Gun Valkyrie from Sega, and 50 Cent, this is actually a good game.
That's a great game.
It has no business being as good as it is.
I love the 50 Cent game, Blood in the Sand. Is it Blood in the Sand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that game has no right being as good as it is. But yes, 76 new additions to backwards compatibility. And many of them do have the frame rate boost. Among them were the Gears of War games, the Fear trilogy, and the frame rate boost. Some of these games are now 120 frames a second. Max Payne 3, because it was uncapped, is now close to 60 frames a second. It's not consistent, but it's still a much bigger improvement over the original release. And ironically, the Max Payne trilogy on backwards compatibility is a higher quality release than Grand Theft Auto, the definitive trilogy release from Grove Street Games. The power of backwards compatibility emulation. But I would say the big news actually came after. And it's when Microsoft put out a statement thanking the community for all the feedback and passion and recommendations for backwards compatibility software. But Microsoft announced that the backwards compatibility team has reached their limits of ability to bring games to the catalog from the past due to licensing, legal, and technical restraints. So It sounds as though these 70 plus games are the final additions to backwards compatibility. Now, Microsoft has used this language before, that this was the final update and we got another update later, but they never put in that final stipulation that it's ending due to licensing, legal, and technical constraints.
It almost seemed like they were projecting a little bit, that there was some frustration there, that they want to continue this, but it's something that they've looked at, they've explored, they've thrown some money at it, and it hasn't really gone in their favor, which I think is interesting,
Yeah, I mean, one title that I've seen a lot of people tweet about is Jet Set Radio Future. This came out on the original Xbox, and I've heard about this game numerous times about why it has not come to Xbox backwards compatibility, and the simple reasoning is licensing. The music associated to the game would require Sega to renegotiate a licensing deal with the artist, and the cost to make that happen is simply too high to justify bringing the title to backwards compatibility. This is something Microsoft has repeatedly inquired about, and they wanted to make reality. And the fact that they couldn't is not only upsetting for fans, but this is something that Microsoft is also disappointed with. This was a game that they set as a goal to bring to the service. And there's definitely some omissions that I would say caught me by surprise. And those titles include Wolfenstein from the original Xbox and Quake 4 from the Xbox 360. And the reason I'm surprised by this is that Microsoft owns Bethesda now.
Yeah, I was surprised about those as well. I mean, you kind of expected anything that was done by Bethesda, even the OG Xbox Doom 3, stuff like that, yes. Right? That was obviously done. You would expect those games would have come over, but I also wonder if they're saving those in their back pocket for something else, and I want to be very clear to people. I don't know anything about what's happening with Quake beyond, my involvement in the Quake remaster. But I do wonder if there is more to come from Quake at some point. But look, I think Wolfenstein was a surprise as well. I don't know, man. Things just seem so much harder these days than they used to be. Because I mean, if you look at the Xbox 360, a lot of people forget, but you could literally play half the original Xbox back catalog on the 360, including Jet Set Radio Future. And things just seem so much easier back then. Now, sure, licenses were still valid at the time and all that stuff. There was no renegotiation that needed to happen and everything. But everything was just so much more streamlined. Here's an emulator. Here's a way to play 500 of your old games on the hardware. And we're at the point now where it's like everything is a negotiation. Everything requires relicensing. There's multiple parties that are at the table, and all of them want a piece of it. Jet Set Radio Future, I mean, technically there's zero reason why that game could not live on the backward compatibility list for the Xbox. But unfortunately, Nate, like you mentioned, it's all about the music licenses. And there is, I don't know the exact number, but there is a lot of different composers on the Jet Set Radio Future soundtrack. And it basically means getting everyone on board with it, which I couldn't even begin to imagine how much money that would be. It could be into the millions of dollars. I don't know what that looks like, but all it takes is one of them to say no. And look, a lot of people would say, well, can't you just replace the soundtrack? Well, if you replace the soundtrack, is it emulation at that point, or are you porting the game, right? I mean, that's a different conversation when you start talking about replacing parts of the game with something else. It's not emulation anymore. So that means that you need to get access to the original code base and then start making modifications to it. So that's a different thing altogether. So look, I was disappointed when I saw that, but I also felt like I kind of appreciate the transparency as well, that look, Microsoft said, look, we have kind of exhausted our resources, trying to get licensing for these games. And, unfortunately, this is the last one. But hopefully, like you said, Nate, this is not we're not done with this stuff. But maybe it's something that, that they want to continue with, but right now is just not going to work for them,
Yeah, I'm hopeful that they still continue to have ongoing negotiations where they could potentially overcome some of these licensing deals, because there's even games from Microsoft's own back catalog, like the MechAssault games, Project Gotham, that are not part of the backwards compatibility list. And I have fond memories with both of those games. And I'm not even asking for like online play from MechAssault 2. I just want to be able to play MechAssault again on a modern platform. And Project Gotham 1 and 2 are two of the best racing games ever to come to market. You have the Kudos system, which was the game's trick system.
Yeah, I love those games. And I was a big fan of the Rally Sport Challenge games as well that DICE did. For similar reasons. I think those games were technically fantastic, and they were great racing games as well. And look, I mean, it does sadden me that, these omissions had to have occurred at the end of the day. It really is unfortunate, but hopefully, there is light, and we'll continue to see this in some fashion going forward.
What is curious is that Xbox's Phil Spencer actually spoke on the idea of emulation as a preservation solution and gave a very candid answer that I think surprised many. In an interview with Axios, Spencer says, "My hope, and I think I have to present it in a way as of now, is as an industry, we'd work on legal emulation that allowed modern hardware to run any, within reason, older executable, allowing someone to play any game." And he continued to say, "I think in the end, if we said, hey, anyone should be able to buy any game or own any game and continue to play, that seems like a great North Star for us as an industry." And he's right.
Yep. 100% right.
This is how the music, as in normal music, not video game music, manages to operate. You can still find and listen to old music without having to go through all these licensing issues that video games face. And this is why video games will forever face the issue of being considered an art form, because preservation, to enjoy a modern take on an old game, has so many fences before it. And it is impossible to hop over all of them, because if it were easy, we would have Jet Set Radio Future on our Xbox Series X right now. We'd be able to play that game. And the reason that we can't, as we discussed, due to licensing issues, where Microsoft or Sega would have to negotiate deals with the artist and pay out potentially hundreds, if not, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, just so we could play the game again. I mean, it's a damn shame, because it's just limiting the exposure and the enjoyment one could have. Like, that is a game I played on the original Xbox. I no longer own a physical copy of the game. So my only option is to go out there and buy a used copy, secondhand market, for a markup price that is, probably astronomical, because someone wants to sell the game for $150 and they feel as though they can. Whereas Phil Spencer is saying here, why shouldn't you be able to play it through legal emulation on your Series X right now?
Agree. I mean, look, I think, again, it just goes on from the messaging around the last batch of back compat games. I think, I mean, Phil is someone that I know for a fact that he's very passionate about preservation and backward compatibility and emulation. I know this quite well. So I think he's definitely on the right track here. But it's something that the industry has to work together to solve. This is not something that Microsoft themselves can just throw money at and do. This is something that requires some big players on the table, where they all basically come to an agreement on, hey, look, we want to bring our games back for everyone to enjoy. So we want to break down those barriers of licensing issues and music and royalties and that. So from I guess what he's getting at is, if there is a way where Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo and Disney and these big companies can all agree on terms, and when I say agree on terms, I mean basically, throw money around and get paid certain amount of money every single year for kind of the rights to use any of their back catalog, without any barriers. I think that's what he's kind of looking for. And look, I think he said, the word hope. This is definitely something that is going to take a long time to mount, if it even ever happens. But I do really appreciate his transparency, and I love the fact that he's talking about this, and he's basically extending the conversation to others to say, look, we're ready. We're Microsoft, and we're ready to talk. We want to do this. So whatever we need to do, let's start talking and seeing where this goes. So I really think it's a great message.
Yeah, it's definitely a great message, and hopefully it's something that the industry does listen to, and we're able to make progress on this front, because this benefits not just Microsoft, it benefits Nintendo, Sony, and the industry as a whole. Yes, maybe, a third-party publisher won't be able to make extra money by selling us that old ROM on a digital store for, $15.
Yeah.
But this is about preservation. It's about having access to history. This is about being able to play these old games without this unnecessary step. And hopefully they are able to work together and come up with a feasible solution that, they can all agree to. But I mean, at the moment, Phil Spencer is definitely looking at an ambitious concept here. This is a progressive idea. Is it pie in the sky? Yes.
Absolutely.
But
so is Game Pass, right? I mean, no one believed in Game Pass. People just said this is ridiculous. So, if we can somehow get off the ground a Game Pass for emulation type system, that would be terrific. And I don't think Phil's just talking about Xbox. I mean, I think Phil is talking about, like I said, an industry thing. So, he's speaking in broader terms, and I think that's the way you have to, in this situation.
Yes, you have to dream big and, shoot for the stars. And, Phil Spencer's comments definitely give me hope for the future.
Absolutely. And look, I'm, Nate, I'm a big advocate for emulation and preservation. I've always had concerns about this stuff. When Microsoft did announce that this was the last backward compatible update, then I thought about Jet Set Radio Future. I mean, that game is stuck in limbo now. It's stuck on the original Xbox. And like you said, you either pay reseller price to get a copy of it, or you download an illegal ROM and an emulator to play the game. And that's the reality of that situation. You won't see that on modern Xbox hardware. And, then I compare that to, movies. I mean, you can still play any, movie DVD on any player, and watch that movie. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So I think, why shouldn't video games be in the same way? Why can't you play an old game on a new system? And I think you should be able to. And look, I do applaud Phil for his transparency, his words, and hopefully it's not just PR speak. I don't believe it is, and hopefully we'll see something come out of this. Hopefully we'll see more reports of other industry titans come forward and say, yes, we want to help. What can we do? And maybe we'll see something come out of this. But it is definitely a long road that this will have to occur on.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with the movie comparison. Like, even if I were to go out there right now and I found a copy of Jet Set Radio Future,
you can't play
I need an original Xbox.
You can't play it.
Or an Xbox 360 to even play it.
Right.
And finding a good working Xbox 360 can prove challenging. Finding a good operating original Xbox with all the cables and everything could prove challenging. And when you think about it, like, now you have to find a controller.
Yep.
That's not always simple. There's so many obstacles in the way to play. And these are games that only came out 20 years ago.
Right.
There is no need for that. The disc-based systems should have had a solution for this in mind years ago. And hopefully we do see something, as you were mentioning just a few minutes ago. Hopefully all the titans of the industry come together and we're able to find a movie or a CD type of solution where you have that disc. You can play it on anything moving forward, and we're going to offer it on a digital store or however necessary. Something has to change here because we should be able to access old software and be able to play them on modern devices, and that should be for eternity.
Absolutely. Well said.
And what else is well said is you can get 20% off and free shipping with the code NateTheHate. That's one word, NateTheHate at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Just use the code NateTheHate. It's time to join the Manscaped movement. And remember, folks, these products are no joke. And with that, we can move into some of the Streamlabs questions for this week. And our first Streamlabs question is a $25 donation from Wusiji Doctor, who writes, "Hi, love both your guys' content. Fellow Mario Sunshine hate embracer here. What drives you crazy about the game? If you are willing, I'd love to include your reply to this in my comical video I'm making about the game as a funny yet fitting cameo."
One word.
Sure.
One word. Flood.
Yes.
Well, that's not technically.
Flood.
That's technically not one word, but you know what I'm saying. Flood.
Yeah, flood is definitely one of the reasons. The camera, the controls, there's just a lot about that game I do not like. Flood is definitely one of them. I hate Flood. But the controls and the camera are just abysmal. They fight against you the entire game. The best part of the game is where you are doing the platforming flood-free. Those segments are Mario platforming at their peak. Everything else about Mario Sunshine is just darkness.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, you can use this as a cameo in your comical video. Then had a $2 donation from Mr. L, who writes, "Recently, we have heard that Nintendo is open to more outside acquisitions. Who do you see them potentially buying up? I could see someone close like Game Freak, thus giving them total control over Pokemon, or a reliable Western studio like WayForward.
What do you think, Nate?
I really cannot see Nintendo acquiring anyone in the near future that makes any meaningful impact. I know Nintendo did express that interest in their financial reports, but even they kind of made the stipulation of this isn't a focus of ours. If a studio like a Next Level Games, who was looking to sell, maybe presents the offer to Nintendo, we may see an acquisition be placed, but I don't see Nintendo actively hunting and searching.
Yeah.
As for a studio who would fit, their nature, I think Game Freak wants to remain independent. I don't see Way Forward looking to be bought anytime soon. Maybe a studio like Tauntalus. They've done some of the HD remakes for Nintendo over the years. They did Twilight Princess HD. Maybe a studio like that who has already worked closely with Nintendo in some capacity, but I don't really see anyone being purchased by Nintendo, at least not in the foreseeable future.
I agree. I don't get any vibes that they're interested in acquiring anyone at this time. I think they're pretty happy with the current state of things. Next Level Games obviously was an opportunity that kind of fell in their lap and they jumped on, which, in some ways I don't want to say their hand was forced, because Nintendo does whatever they want. They move when they need to move, but I don't necessarily expect any other ones to come out at least next year.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. We then had a $3 donation from Alan, who writes, 2022 is a huge year for Nintendo from a first-party games perspective. Looking back at the last 4 years, outside of 2017, the game lineup has been pretty underwhelming as far as new games are concerned. Is this time span something to expect going forward? The time span actually suits what you typically see from game development. It's been 4 years since 2017, which is when the teams behind Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, Splatoon, Mario Kart team who did ARMS, they finished up their prior projects. So they've been actively working on new projects for the last 4 to 5 years. So 2022, even the first half of 2023 is right on schedule with traditional development time. So yeah, this is something that you will typically see from any developer, not just Nintendo, but Microsoft, third parties, Sony, everyone. You typically work on a new game for 4 to 5 years.
Yep.
Then had a $1 donation from Liam Werner, who writes, why do you think Amiibo has lasted so long, but Skylanders, Lego Dimensions, and Disney Infinity bit the dust? I get people are excited for Nintendo figures, but merch is like half of Disney's business. So you would think at least Infinity would last.
I don't really know enough about these things to really give a great answer. Obviously, Skylanders is the audience is for a younger audience. Amiibo is kind of all over the place, right? There are collectors, there are Nintendo fans, there are fans of the games. I think people collect Amiibo for different reasons. Some of them actually want to use them in the games, like that Loftwing one for Skyward Sword HD obviously was something that, would actually help you in the game. So I don't know. I mean, people love Nintendo characters and they have their favorites, and I think people kind of embrace Amiibo for different reasons.
Yeah, I'd also be curious how well Amiibo are actually selling these days compared to when they were introduced.
True.
Nintendo kind of has to commit to the Smash Brothers line at this point. They have to finish it, so they can't just be like, oh yeah, we're not making a Sora Amiibo because you're not buying the other ones. They kind of committed to that, so they have to. But if you really look at the flow of Amiibo over the last couple of years, it's definitely been more limited. As you mentioned, like the Loftwing Amiibo. We had the Metroid Dread Amiibos, which if you scan in the games, you get a health item and the super missiles. But they're definitely not a consistent release. It's mostly just a Smash line and maybe one or two to like a new Zelda or a new Mario release. So they definitely scaled them back considerably.
Yeah.
Then had a $1 donation from Jackie G, who writes, back when Days Gone released in 2019, how much did Sony expect from the game? Obviously, in retrospect, they were unhappy with its performance, but how much did it fail to meet their expectations? I mean, Days Gone was definitely viewed as a AAA experience. So this is probably a game internally Sony was looking for north of 5 to potentially 8 million sales with a good Metacritic score on top of that.
Yeah.
We then had a $3 donation from Afro Soul Reaper. All right. Thank you both for all you do. Baked pumpkin seeds with crushed red pepper and garlic for the win. That's right. I don't know why everyone on the Spawncast hates pumpkin seeds. We then had a $5 donation from Stephen N. Parker. What do you guys think about The Verge's new background policy? They're no more a source familiar with the situation, but will be clearer with company spokesperson, etc. Should other gaming outlets like Bloomberg, Kotaku, Eurogamer follow the same policy? I actually just saw this in practice just this week. I was curious as to what it meant.
I was going to ask you, Nate, because I mean, you're more into this stuff than me as far as the media side. So, what are your thoughts and everything? Like, I don't really have much of an opinion on this because this is not really my area. So, but I was curious to hear what you thought.
I believe they actually had a report out this week where they still cited just as a source. It depends on the context of the article and what they are reporting. But I think it sounds as though maybe in prior reporting, when they were talking to a spokesperson, maybe they did not frame it that way when they were trying to get clarification to a situation, in which case it should have been made clear that it is a spokesperson. Just they're relaying official information to them, maybe just outside of a press release.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if that's the case, yeah, that's something that all outlets should embrace. But if you do have traditional sources giving you information ahead of time for a report, then it should remain as, individuals with knowledge of this matter, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the context. We then had a $1 donation from Auric305. Who writes, what is your preference on performance versus quality mode for Forza Horizon 5? The game looks incredible, like playing an episode of Planet Earth. Which of these modes do you think best showcases the game on the Series X and a 4K OLED TV?
I haven't taken mine off performance mode. I've heard great things about, having the visual fidelity and dropping the game down to 30 to get that really realistic game. But look, I'm always going to take 60 FPS no matter what. And I think the game still looks incredible in performance mode. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, otherwise I would say it's just up to your personal preference. If you can play the game and enjoy it at 30 frames a second, do quality mode and enjoy all the visual fidelity the game has to offer.
Yeah.
Then had a $2.38 donation from Matanume, who writes, wasn't Hey Pikmin 4? No, it wasn't. But I can see why you might think it was. Matanume then followed up with a $3.97 donation and writes, rumors of Rare Replay for Nintendo Switch came around years ago. What was the idea of this? I imagine we are getting some Rare N64 ROMs instead. N64 Perfect Dark? Diddy Kong Racing? The rumors of Rare Replay for the Nintendo Switch from a few years ago definitely had foundation. This was something that was being discussed and even actively developed to some capacity. Now, that could have been pivoted to N64 NSO with Rare and Microsoft cooperation, as we have seen with Banjo-Kazooie. Mm-hmm. I mean, Perfect Dark, Diddy Kong Racing, those are definitely candidates. We will see more Rare games come to the service in the future. How long that could take is, to be determined at this point. But they did have negotiations to bring more games to the service from Rare, and hopefully Diddy Kong Racing is one of them, because Diddy Kong Racing Online with good netcode would be fun. Then had a $1.34 donation from Retrolibrium, who writes, hey Nate and MVG, I don't intend to seem disrespectful, but I'd like to hear some insight on your reason behind leaking Halo multiplayer news. Why announce the news when it would only be 2 to 3 days to wait? I know some people feel the surprise was ruined by this. I put the news out on Friday because when I was viewing social media, you had other accounts that were digging into the servers who were already kind of implying it and teasing it without outright just saying the date. And I said, you know what? This is going to leak this weekend. Someone's going to say it. Why don't I just do it now? And that's what I did. I just put it out there, and some may feel as though the surprise was ruined. But what I would ask is, and MVG, you can answer this if you want. If the rumor did not become public, would you have watched the 20th anniversary presentation with any anticipation of anything happening? I feel as though the rumors actually gave people a reason to watch the show because they were looking forward to the announcement taking place. Because prior to the rumor, Microsoft really didn't hype or even provide much reason to watch the 20th anniversary show.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Nate. I mean, I was going to say yes because, and only because there was rumors of backward compatible games coming, right? So there was leaks about that. So yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. You know, like if there is anticipation that something that may come, then yeah, I mean, I'm going to watch it. And you're right. I think if it was just a 20th anniversary celebration and they basically shut down anything, then I probably may have given it a miss, to be honest. I mean, Microsoft doesn't always put on the best shows. So, but look, I think the other thing we have to let, I don't remember the person's name that made this, the Streamlabs question, but you weren't the one that broke the story. This was already leaking online, right? I mean, I had seen some tweets about this already, and I think you came in and just basically independently verified this information. So I don't even really put stock in that you were the one that broke this story. You know, like I think this story was breaking. No matter what was happening, it was going to break, right? So I think you kind of just verified what you had heard, which is totally fine. I mean, I think one way or the other, there was no way that this was going to be a surprise for Monday, their 20th anniversary celebration.
Correct. I mean, that's the thing. I saw the tweets implying all of it, and it's just nobody really wanted to say, hey, this is coming Monday. And I was basically watching a dam with water bursting through it already. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be the wrecking ball. I'm just going to take the wall down. Just let the water flow. I can independently confirm the information. I'm going to say the date, let people have anticipation of it. And I mean, I knew friends who were looking to pre-order Battlefield last week because they're like, well, I have a month before Halo comes out. I was kind of like, you know what? If I can put this information out there, I can save you $70. Kind of helping you there, but it's never with the intent to ruin an announcement. It's to build some excitement for the event coming.
Yeah.
We then had a $3 donation from Nathan Borman, who donated $3 and writes, I've not enjoyed gaming as much as I have with Game Pass for the last year. I'm playing 2 to 3 games a month, with most being new releases like Quake Remastered. Am I hurting devs by only playing through Game Pass? I love gaming and respect devs and what they do.
You're not hurting devs by playing through Game Pass. I guarantee you.
Yeah, typically what Microsoft does is they make a deal with the publisher or developer, depending on how the game is released, if it's self-published or not, and they pay them a considerable sum of money to put the game on the service. Now, what type of deal the publisher has with the developer is a different matter, but both parties are being compensated in some way, and usually compensated quite well. And that was the last Streamlabs question for this week. And this episode was once again dedicated to Shamsa, who generously donated $100. And if you would like to support the channel, we have a Streamlabs link in our description below. Donate any dollar amount, ask a question. We will answer it at the end of the episode. Donate $100 or more, and we will dedicate the episode to you. And once again, this episode is dedicated to Shamsa. And that will conclude this week's episode of Nate the Hate. I'd like to thank my co-host, MVG, for joining me as always.
Always a pleasure, Nate. Thanks for having me on.
It's always a pleasure having you. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give the video a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. And let us know your thoughts on Xbox's Series X and S's first year in the comment section below, as well as Microsoft's new philosophy on backwards compatibility and backwards compatibility ending on the Xbox Series line of platforms in the comment section. And until next time, continue to embrace the hate.